Hey there, this is Tom with the Diogenes Lamp podcast. I appreciate you listening in, and most importantly, I hope you enjoy what you hear. Before we start with today's episode, I'm going to ask you for a small favor. Believe it or not, history podcasts, especially in their early stages, tend not to be cash cows. Shocker, I know. I too was blindsided by this news. Now, I didn't go into this for the money, I think that much is obvious. But unfortunately, books, research materials, and equipment aren't free. Please, go to patreon.com/Diogenes Lamp Podcast, and for less than the price of a coffee once a month, you can become a member and get access to bonus episodes, recommended reading lists and documentaries, shout-outs, and anything else we'll offer in the future as this project grows. If you are especially broke, hey, I get it, but please, make sure to give us a 5-star review when you listen to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and subscribe to the pod on your preferred podcast listening medium. Your support is appreciated, and more importantly, it is needed in order to keep this operation going. On that note, I hope you have a great day, and now back to the show. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Diogenes Lamp podcast. This episode is a bit of a break from the Greek Civil War segment we've been building on for a while now. Of course, we aren't stopping that segment or anything, but I figured it'd be nice to offer you guys, the listeners, something a bit different, something that touches on ancient Greek history and modern Greek culture. This episode is a collaboration between Diogenes Lamp and Hearth of Hellenism, which explores Greek history, religion, and culture, along with reflections on contemporary theolatry, polytheism, as it's called. Similar to what we do here, but with more of a focus on classical Greece and Greek mythology. As you'll see, this discussion touches on very important questions and tough ones too, like what does it mean to be Greek or to be a Hellene? What is Hellenism? And what did it mean thousands of years ago? And what does it mean today? Hope you guys enjoy. Bye-bye. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Tom with Diogenes Lamp. I got Basil over here as well, and we have a guest. This is really a collaboration of sorts, I should say, between Diogenes Lamp podcast and Hearth of Hellenism, another great podcast, especially if you are at all into, well, I'll let the host of Hearth of Hellenism really introduce it. Angelo, if you want to go ahead and tell us about it. I mean, from what I gather, it's classical Greeks, polytheism. I'll let you say it. I think you'll have a much better idea.
Thank you for having me on your podcast. This is great. I like this kind of crossover sort of collaboration. So the Hearth of Hellenism is a project that I started several years ago, and my main focus is on everything Greek, ancient, modern, and in between. So that's how I kind of frame it. But my main focus is mostly the ancient and somewhat of the in-between, which would lead us into late Roman Byzantine period. The modern is kind of my weak spot at the moment, but that's where I think this crossover is great because your podcast deals a lot with the modern history, the few episodes that have come out already that you've talked about with the Civil War and things like that. So that's the modern things. So and I deal with Greek religion, polytheism. I am a practicing Greek polytheist, so I try to discuss those sorts of issues and talk about anything and everything Greek that I find interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty much like how exactly I would frame it. And yeah, it's just like you were saying, like our strong spot at Diogenes Lamp is modern history, really like Balkan Wars on, maybe 1897 on. Like we have a lot of things we'll be working on in the future. It's funny, Basil and Angelo, and probably a lot of our listeners too have heard this. If you're a Greek American, or if you're not a Greek American, maybe you were the one asking, but as a kid, you were asked, "Oh, you're Greek. Do you worship the Greek gods?" Funny enough, Angelo does worship the Greek
I
gods.
do, yeah.
He does.
I wasn't raised as one, though. I came to that later in life. But yes, it is funny. It is true. People do ask you that as a kid. Do you worship, the Greek gods? And it's actually that kind of question kind of reveals to us the perceptions of Greeks today, the lack
Right.
of probably knowledge about us and our history. The education system here in the United States mostly focuses just on classical
Yep.
Greece, and even that is very reductive, where they will basically just talk about Athens and Sparta and the Delian League, the Peloponnesian War, and I think that's about it, really. That's your public education, like in middle school, high school of Greece.
I mean, were you guys taught anything other than that? I was not.
Um, I remember, well, I remember when we in high school, we when the teacher started the section on ancient Greece, everyone in the classroom turned and looked at me and said, "He's getting 100." And I did get 100 on that test. So I was very happy. And then at the end, of the section on ancient Greece, the
It
teacher was
was
like, "I'm
easy
very
for you.
it was easy. But I had a passion for these from a young age, and I really have to credit my father for instilling my love in the classical Greek world, because that's also what he admired as well. And I feel like Greek people, we're a people that has a schizophrenic identity between ancient and the Byzantine sort of
Yeah,
identities, and I feel
it's
like
true.
people in the Greek community tend to either go one way or the other, or maybe neither, and they just try to be either white American or European Westerners, and they try
Right.
to distance themselves from either of those two things.
Which is ironic because I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I don't.
Mhm.
I mean,
Right?
maybe
Yeah.
I read a lot of history, but I mean, why can't you? Why does it have to be? Well, we know why, because one's Christian, one's.
Yes, there
I
is
feel
an
like that's a part of a breaking point, anyways.
There is that's a major breaking point, is the religious sort of distinction between the ancient Greek world with the polytheism and its emphasis on education, the type of education they had, and later Christian developments, the Christian religion, and how, their prerogatives. There was a clash between ancient Greek Pythia and the Christian sort of religious focus on things.
Right.
And they had their education too. Like, I don't want to say like the Christians, the Byzantine period. And when I say Byzantine, I really don't say that in the sense that that is a real identity. These were Romans. These were, the Byzantine
Right.
Empire wasn't a thing. It was
Right.
the Roman Empire. These people saw themselves as Romans, and their religion was Orthodoxy.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so
Right. Right.
they did preserve the ancient Greek texts. They selected basically our modern canon of classical literature is was created by the Byzantines, because they're the ones who transmitted and copied and preserved these ancient texts that they found useful for themselves.
Right. And this is what and what you're saying really runs counter to is like the counter narrative to like the argument that you'll encounter by, let's just say, certain Slavic neighbors to the north, or even Northern Europeans in the EU, that there's this absence of cultural continuity between ancient Greece and Greece. Which, okay, perhaps, I mean, even discussing this is very controversial and whatnot, I think, anyways.
Yeah.
But I don't think that there was that complete absence as it's framed in Byzantine times.
Yes.
Maybe you can speak more than that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
History is basically looking at the continuities and the breaks and things. What has changed and what has remained. That's history. I remember this is one of the earliest things you sort of learn in history, is how to discuss and look at continuity and change. And so when we talk about Greeks today as a modern people with we have a state called the Hellenic Republic,
Right.
Greece. But throughout history, that identity as a collective sort of ethnic, thing didn't really it did go away. So when the Christians take over, and they took over the empire, the being a Hellene wasn't a good thing. It was a pejorative. It was connected with polytheism and
Right.
everything that wasn't Christian.
Right. Right. Right.
So, but at that time, with the Christians, what they were doing is in their own formation of their own identity of what is Christian, they had to other everything else that they thought that wasn't Christian. And in the East, in the Greek-speaking East, they associated everything that wasn't Christian with Greek. And that
Right.
it didn't matter if you were an Egyptian, an Assyrian, or whatnot. Again, this whole region, they're Greek speakers. This is Greek culture and everything. They just said that's all Greek.
Hmm.
And so, and it wasn't a good thing. And so people, were Romans, and then they had a Christian identity, and that was the predominant view for centuries. However, the Greek as an identity did resurge after some point later on. Even as even when they were Christians and Romans, they still had an understanding of what is their legacy. So the legacy that
Right.
this empire, this Christian Roman Empire still had the connection to the ancient Greek literature. So Homer, like for example, never disappeared. So Homer was always foundational to the educational system within the ancient Greek world, and he still remained important in his own way within the Byzantine Empire and at different periods. So again, it always depends on what period you are in and what you're looking at. And like for example, I have in my bookshelf, it's a commentary on the Iliad and the Odyssey from like the 10th or 11th century,
Oh
I
wow.
think. Yeah, so it was for the empress. I think she was a German empress that married into the the imperial family, and she had to be educated on like the culture of the high court, and
Right.
because people would make allusions to things in the Iliad or the Odyssey. So for her to understand what people are talking about, what kind of things they're alluding to when they reference things, she needed a basically someone to explain to her, because these things were Homeric. So it was still part of culture at different parts and different times. Our first Homeric scholar is a Byzantine Orthodox bishop who wrote the first like major, like I think, commentary on Homer and stuff like that. So, these things were always part of us, but they wrestled with it because again, it was polytheistic. There are gods. They had to deal with that and wrestle with that and had to explain them in
Right.
certain ways. So they weren't gods anymore. They were allegories or something else.
Yeah, and I feel like if you want to get biblical with it too, I mean, the Book of Maccabees literally is about, the Seleucid Empire. I forgot who the ruler was, but I believe it was the Seleucid Empire.
Antiochus.
Was
I
that
believe
him,
it's Antiochus.
Antiochus?
Yeah.
Yeah, forcing the Jews to, pretty much trying to Hellenize him.
Yeah. Well,
Hellenize
they
him,
were.
quote, "We'll worship the gods anyways," right?
I believe he installed a temple into the temple in Jerusalem, a statue of Zeus. I believe that's one of
Right, and he
the
was forcing them to
did.
like give offering or whatever, right? That's what I thought, and
I
they
don't know the
tweaked out.
specifics of him particularly in his policies, but that region, Hellenization and the spread of Greek culture in that region was so much of a magnetic force that everyone was Hellenizing.
Right,
And, when we say what does it mean to be Hellenizing, to speak Greek, to dress Greek, to adopt a Greek way of living, going to the theater, going to the
Greek way of
gymnasium,
thinking,
a Greek way
yeah.
of just a Greek way of living, going to the gymnasium,
Hmm.
dressing a certain way, being educated with Greek Bithia, stuff like that.
Hmm.
And the Jews were no exception to that. The Jews were highly Hellenized, and this is where a lot of these terms come from, like a Hellenist, for example. That sort of term, it comes from, directly to refer to Jews who adopted Greek culture, because this is within that literature of the Maccabees. This is how they were referring um, to the Jews who adopted Greek culture, because the Maccabees, the people who were against it, didn't want to Hellenize, because
Right.
I guess in a nutshell is, you're losing your identity, and I don't blame them. It's very difficult, if you want to preserve your identity and have your who you are, to continue. There's going to be this conflict between the dominant culture of the Greeks and then your own local native culture. So
That's
I
interesting.
don't blame them for being upset.
No, of course. I mean, you'd feel the same way if you were on their end, right?
Yes.
Who wouldn't? I think that's a pretty solid segue. I don't know, Basil, is there anything you want to?
Yeah, I just want to. I loved Angela's comment about the schizophrenic identity, because a lot of people just seem to focus on the ancient, skip 2,000 years of history, and then go right to what their parents taught them yesterday.
Yeah.
So, and I think it plays out a lot with people who might not be super educated on Greek history. Like if you look at the comments on an Instagram post about anything that has the hashtag Greek, you'll see people claiming to be a descendant of Alexander the Great. You'll see people claiming, people, I think, forget that so much has happened over the course and in that region. And there's been so many people and so many different cultures mixing and dominating and conquering that it created a unique thing that you can't put in a box.
No.
I mean, you even see it when people use, we have the terms Greek, Hellenic, Byzantine, like all these things are right in their own way, but they don't all come together in a pretty pop picture in a box.
Yeah, I'd also say it's more like a Venn diagram approach, I feel like, kind of. I don't know. It's very complicated. I just feel like they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, right?
Yeah, I want to be as embracing of everything that we can to understand it, because it is part of our heritage. There's a book I'll show you. I think his last name is Vasopoulos. I forgot his name, but he has a book. It's called the Heritage of the Greeks or something, and it's an early Greek historical book by a Greek historian that talks about this classical Byzantine heritage of the Greek modern nation state. So it kind of goes into those themes,
like statecraft and stuff and that kind of thing.
Yeah, but like I like to frame it. We're the children of empires. We have to really kind of take a broad, long view of our history. And the one thing that when we talk about continuity and changes, the thing that is the continuity the most is the language. Greek is one of the oldest speaking languages in the world.
He who speaks Greek is Greek, they used to say in ancient times, right?
Yeah. So there's a book here I have. It's The Greeks by Roderick
Beaton.
Beaton, the Greeks, a global history, and he deals with this issue of like when we talk about the Greeks and their history, just you deal with it through everyone who spoke that language, So I find that to be very inclusive, and it's easy to deal with those sorts of things. These are the people who spoke the language in their history. So that goes from the Mycenaean period to the classical period to Hellenistic to the Roman to the modern, and all this entire time, us today, like it's a global perspective of our history.
Right. There was much more to it than one thing or another. There were definitely significant facts. The biggest sounds like Greek.
Yeah.
There's another good quote by Thales. Thales is how you say it in English, Thales. It's like Greek without philotimo is a Greek without air. It's another quote. In other words, it was a lot of things contributing to to Hellenic culture, or whatever you want to call it. Greek, Hellenic, whatever.
Yeah. Basil, your points about continuity, and we were talking about how, so in continuity, you're talking about how, people know about the ancient Greek world, the classical stuff, but, they know about like Athens, Sparta, their fight, the Peloponnesian War, the Delian League, and then Alexander the Great. I forgot to mention that earlier.
Who's sometimes taught to be Macedonian. I was told he was not Greek
Yes, we have that whole issue. Oh, he's not Greek, he's Macedonian. It's like it's a pseudo problem. Like they're Hellenic people.
Right.
That whole thing of like, is he Greek or are they barbarians? That was a purely Athenian propaganda because they were scared and threatened by Philip's power.
Right, and there are other Greek city-states calling other Greek city-states barbarians as well.
Right.
Even today, you still have Vlachophobia. Greeks from today are always calling other people from other parts of Greek Vlachi.
Yeah.
Like I was talking to some people. I was in Ikaria, and I told them where my dad's from. My dad's from Mani. We consider ourselves the top Greeks. Okay, we were the only part of Greece.
Well, Mani is the region where the last polytheists.
We were the last ones to be converted.
Yeah,
literally the last ones.
Record. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were also the only part of Greece never had a Turkish occupying force,
Hmm.
right? They'd come in, but they'd always kick them out. So we consider there's a saying in Mani, and it goes Thais Sakos. The names that end in is, as, akos, maniatis, maniateas, maniatakos. You're maniatis, you're maniateas, you're maniatakos. You're maniati.
Hmm.
Is, os ke ulos, but the people with os and ulos, bastardos que mulos, right?
Yeah.
Bastard, and then mulos is like your mixed blood, right? Like your great grandma's, right?
Yeah.
The maniatas are that, so we're very proud about that, whatever. To the extreme. I mean, that's
Yeah.
where CFE's stronghold was in
Yeah.
Mani. And then I'm telling this lady, Nikari, and she goes, oh, you're Mani? We call you Kato Vlahi. Lower
Oh,
from,
Vlachi.
and it's crazy, and we
Yeah.
call people from Tripoli Vlahi, and people from here call other people Vlahi. Everyone's
Yeah.
it's always been
This
like that with Greeks. Everyone's a better Greek than the other Greek.
exactly.
Hmm.
The infighting is, I think, is the thing that defines Greeks is that we're always fighting each other.
Yep.
It's
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
it's annoying. If there's no like I think the only time we weren't fighting each other was when the Romans were occupying us.
Right. When the
Really,
Romans,
like that. It was the
yeah,
only time we
and
like
when the
we
Italians invaded, you
the
could say too,
Italians.
and the Germans in World
Yeah.
War II.
Yeah, but it just seems to our default is to kind of fight because everyone
Yeah,
wants to like I guess be the leader, but nobody
yeah.
wants
I
to
don't
lead.
know, but it's a
Well,
thing for sure.
as soon as one person's a leader, they get defined as where they're from or what their
Uh-huh.
name is or
Right.
whatever, and
Yeah.
then
Alexander the
it turns it
Macedonian. In
it
Greece,
turns
they
Yeah.
into
teach him as Alexander the
faction.
Macedonian. He's taught, and my dad would say, "Yeah, Alexander the Macedonian."
Yeah. Because
Right.
that's the
The
region he
region
was
he's
from.
from.
It's like
Yeah.
Spartans, Athenians, and Macedonians. It's their region, but they're all of a Hellenic.
Hmm.
The
Umbrella.
umbrella is they're Hellenic. They spoke Greek. They worshipped the
Of
Greek gods.
course.
Their
Yeah, yeah,
culture
yeah.
was Hellenic. There's nothing about them that's like, oh, that's foreign and non-Greek.
Yeah.
They're
It's
speaking
like,
Greek.
Tom is from Florida,
Yeah,
but he's also from Michigan, and
yeah,
then we're
Right.
from Long Island, but I'm also from
yeah.
Pennsylvania. So it's
Yeah.
like, but we're all American,
And
Right.
the
Right.
issue with this is that for a while, because again, history, we look at what is the evidence, what's the record, and for a long time, the narrative or the thing that people would say, historians, is that so like Philip was in he got to go into the Olympics. Back then, so you had to be Greek to participate
Right.
in the Olympics. So people would say, "Well,
Unquestionably, yeah.
yeah, so you had to prove that you were Greek somehow, and he was able to prove that his family and lineage, they're Greeks. And
They're
so
also from the Argolid dynasty, right?
I,
From Argos is
I,
where their dynastic line comes from.
I think so. I don't remember. But the, to that point, though, people would argue, well, maybe it was just the royal family, the upper class, which had that lineage, but the people that they ruled over weren't Greeks. So there was like this. They're trying to separate the people based on class. And say the native population there weren't actually really Greeks. And so I think you'll hear that sort of rhetoric from our neighbors to the north still. Now that was pretty much, you can put that to bed when I think it was in the 80s or 90s, I forgot when it was, but they found a curse tablet in Macedonia in northern Greece that is in Doric dialect. So a curse tablet is, usually a piece of lead that is, someone will write a curse on it and roll it up and do something and throw it into a well or into the river or something and to curse somebody. And it's in Greek. It's in a Doric dialect of Greek. And this is from a lower class. This is from the people at the, on the everyday, society. So it's like, okay, it's like, no, it's not just upper class. It's this is evidence to show that the people on the ground, were speaking this language. This is their
Right.
language.
And that was further solidified too with the findings in Vergina, which I don't know, like the
Yeah.
70s or 80s or whatever.
Yeah.
So I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
this stuff too is from British. I mean, British, epistemological stuff where you have a foreign country arguably knowing as much as you do or even more, or possessing at least that knowledge than
Yeah.
your own country has. Like think of how many of our artifacts are in the British museums and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the knock-on cultural effects that has around the world.
Mhm.
Academic anyways, in academia and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into this. So, what sparked this whole conversation and kind of like drove us to organize this discussion in general? Do you want to talk about Angela, or you want me to talk
Yeah,
about it? Or?
I think mainly this the reason why we're kind of here is to talk about the Greeks today, our perception and the perception of Greeks in Greek history and culture today in modern society, and how, I guess, how our history is used, I guess, and and how we're understood. So particularly with Hearth of Hellenism and what I've been involved with, because I'm a polytheist and I've interacted with other pagans and polytheists. I don't use the word pagan. I don't identify with that term, but for the people who do identify with that term, these pagans, they have misused the term Hellenism, Hellenismos, to mean a religion, the religion of ancient Greece.
Yes.
And so, with that definition, then they go out and they will say, "I'm a." They'll call themselves a few things. They'll say they're either a Hellenic polytheist, a Hellenic pagan, a Hellenist,
Yeesh.
along those lines, and that they practice Hellenism. Their religion is
Yes.
Hellenism,
Yes.
and this is very problematic, to say the least.
I mean, it's cultural appropriation, pretty much, right?
It,
I mean,
it is the definition of cultural appropriation, and cultural, and to appropriate something is to use something. The word appropriation is not a bad word itself. It's how do you apply and use something. But when we talk about cultural appropriation, we're looking at how is something used inappropriately, offensively, incorrectly, and harmfully.
right.
And
So,
mhm.
oh, I was just gonna say, just to like for the listeners to have an idea, there's this Reddit called Hellenism, and in like the side note where it says Hellenism, what the Reddit thing is about, whatever, it says Hellenism, also called Hellenic Polytheism, is a diverse religion honoring the gods of Greece and Rome. Modern Hellenism is based on reconstructing, reviving, or otherwise drawing the polytheistic and animistic religious beliefs and practices of the ancient Greco-Roman world, what Hellenism can be, blah, 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 blah. And all the comments, Hellenism is religion insofar as Christianity is religion. Hellenic polytheism is which in modern times is rather, blah, blah, blah. Hellenism is religion. All these people are convinced Hellenism is religion.
And these aren't Greeks, so just for the listeners to
Right, exactly. Look,
I'm
David
assuming
John.
your main audience is probably other Greek listeners,
Yeah, I mean,
or anyone who's interested in modern Greek history. So
I've tried. Yeah, yeah.
this topic is probably completely coming from left field for so many people, because this is a subculture that
Absolutely.
people aren't aware of.
Yep.
It's annoying.
So
because we look at. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, like I just did some basic Google searches, right? Props to Merriam-Webster, okay, the dictionary. Just Google Hellenism. What is Hellenism? 1, Grecism. I liked that. 2, devotion to or imitation of ancient Greek thought, customs, or styles. Okay. 3,
we'll return to that number 2.
Number 2, devotion to or imitation of ancient Greek thought, customs, or styles.
We'll return to that one.
I see where. Yeah, I think I see where the route you're going, but yeah, absolutely. 3, Greek civilization, especially as modified in the Hellenistic period by influences from Southwestern Asia. 4, a body of humanistic and classical ideals associated with ancient Greece, and including reason, the pursuit of knowledge, and the arts, moderation, civic responsibility, and bodily development. I like the number 4 one especially personally. But go back to the number 2 one, because I think the 2 one also ties in with this type of Reddit stuff, right? Kind of?
Yes, because they think that their imitation today qualifies as Hellenism, but that definition of imitation has a specific historical context of the Hellenistic period, specifically with Hellenized Jews. Because there's a Hellenism, because the Maccabees, go back to the Maccabees, for example, they accused their Hellenized Jews of being, Hellenists and practicing,
Right.
Hellenism. And Hellenism back then was just, so again, Hellenism as a word, we understand what Hellenism is today. its roots as a word originated first in the early Hellenistic period as a term that meant the proper use of the Greek language. That's it. So
Huh.
to speak and write in Greek without any flaws was a mark of Hellenism, Hellenismos.
And back then, that meant a lot, considering, the world and all the
Yes.
areas that the Greeks had
Yeah.
colonized and
Yeah.
whatever. And.
But unfortunately, that boundary um, couldn't be contained to just linguistics. It rapidly, quickly expanded to mean everything Greek in Greek language, the Greek education, Greek music, religion, philosophy, but
Culture, kind of in a nutshell.
culture, and ultimately the pedia, the education.
Right.
In the system of education that the Greeks had, this was foundational to Hellenismos.
Mm-hmm.
So, I find that so much of the what the pagans do when they misuse Hellenism, they're taking things really deeply out of context from history to try to twist it so they can insert themselves into a narrative they don't belong in, that isn't pertaining to them. Because that definition of that number two definition that the dictionary highlights is a historical context very specific to a region and time and to a group of people. It's not talking about the imitation of the ancient Greeks by Susan and Billy in Idaho. It's not.
Right.
But when you point out these things to people that they're word, they will say that words can evolve and change. Words are prescriptive, not there's a they have like they say these things. Words are not prescriptive. They're something basically that words. The dictionary does not like prescribe the words. Like we make the words, and then the
Right.
dictionary later on
The
kind of
relationship is different. It's an affect,
yeah.
you're saying, instead of effect or whatever.
Yeah, it's hard for me to remember specifically the phrase
I
they've
get what
said
you're
to me.
saying,
But
though. Yeah.
yeah, but the thing is, again, it's disingenuous because now we go into cultural appropriation. Words change, but they have to organically change within a culture. You can't just force the word to change because you want it to. That's appropriation. That's misuse of something. A word like today in 2025, with millions of Greeks around the world who deploy and employ Hellenism as a marker of our identity and heritage, our language, all of these things as a marker of who we are. And then to you say, I'm going to change it because words can change, and I'm going to make it into a religion, and you have to basically share your identity with me
Right.
because I
That's
want,
messed
because
up.
I desire, because I can do that. No, you can't do that.
All I hear is me, 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 me.
I'm looking for an identity. And I can get. I'm trying. I try to be understanding as much as I can, but there's times where I flip my switch and I get nasty.
Yeah.
And I try to. I understand where people are coming from because again, we're the diaspora. Greeks in the diaspora. I really want Greeks in the diaspora to really understand our context in the diaspora.
Yeah.
And what's around us, and this pertains to our conversation in many ways. So this particular instance with the pagans, it's a good representation of a broader cultural attitude. So for them, so in America, Christianity is sorry, my dog's barking.
It's okay.
Christianity is the dominant force. As Greeks, we more likely than not grow up as Orthodox Christians, and we're not strangers to Christianity. But the Orthodox Christianity is different than the kind of Christianities you get here in America, which, from what I see from many in the pagan community and lots of other communities, has traumatized people. It's a very traumatizing form of Christianity. You can just look at current politics today with I hope we can say this will eventually they'll come for me.
You're saying orthodoxy is traumatizing?
No, just like evangelicalism, for
Oh, yeah.
example. The types of Christianity that has risen up in America, and the
Right.
American kind of Christianity is very toxic in particular. I never really felt traumatized by Orthodoxy myself. I think the only time I felt traumatized, to use the word, was when I remember I was a child and I was staying at my cousin's house and my uncle was a psalti. And so very religious family, fasted every Wednesdays and Fridays, very like strict, whatever. And I didn't like receiving communion. I hated going to church. And I just didn't like having to dress up. I just didn't like that whole thing and going there. It was kind of just off-putting to me.
Yeah.
And I didn't like wine. I didn't want to have the
Oh
alcohol. Like I
man,
just I
what
don't
kind
quite
of
taste
Greek are
it.
you, Angelo?
I
I'm
know.
joking.
Now I love
Joking.
I love alcohol
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah.
But it's
It's
like
a good thing you
8
didn't like wine as a kid, though. You know that, right?
Yes, yes. So, I mean, like, and then they put the bread in the wine, so it's like spongy and like it's like, what is this? Like,
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And
Fair
so I
enough.
remember my uncle telling me, he's like, "Oh, tomorrow when we go to church, are you going to receive communion?" And I'm like, "No, I don't want." He goes, "What? You don't want Jesus in you?" And I'm just like, "That's what? That's creepy. Like, what do you mean?" I'm like, "What?" I'm like, it's even worse." So it's like that's like the closest I've gotten, I guess, to like traumatized. Other than that, when I was baptized, the priest almost dropped me because the olive oil was too much and I was too slippery. But I don't remember that. But maybe
Oh, you greasy
subconsciously I
fellow.
do. It all starts back then. And then when I was like 3, my mother was baptizing her goddaughter, and I think I almost tried to burn down the church. They said with the candle.
Nice.
I
Jeez,
know.
good track record, man.
I know. I have a good track record. Yeah,
You're
yeah.
painted, in the back where all the candles are, where they have the pictures of people burning in hell and stuff. They're
Oh
gonna have a
yeah.
little spot for a branch. I'm joking,
Yeah,
of course. You're not gonna.
yeah.
Mhm.
So, oh yeah, trauma. So,
That was kind of mean. I'm sorry. That
orthodoxy
was funny.
is not that traumatizing, I would say. At this point for us as Greeks, it's a big social club.
Yeah, and I feel like
It's
I don't know about your guys' experiences. I've never. I mean, listen. Now it might have changed. I don't go to church very often because I just don't go to church, and I think a lot of people that go to church gossip a lot. But there's a lot of good
hmm
people that go to church too, and there's a really good quote by a saint that says, if you're seeking holy people, don't go to a church looking for holy people, right? You know, you're supposed to go to church, pray, ask forgiveness, do whatever you're gonna do, right? Good for you. That's great. But like I grew up in a very boater, we call it, like a very boater church I went to growing up. Like we had kids that would come over regularly directly from Greece, spoke very little English or some English. Out of all the churches in my area I grew up, let's say that, we considered our church the most quote unquote boater. There was never any of these discussions that are talked about in evangelical circles. I think, you know,
Right.
certain topics starting with the word A. I think I don't have to tell you guys, right? The
hmm
most political
Mhm.
thing that we ever had in church that I remember was when all the stuff with Fyrom was going down. Well, North Macedonia now, excuse me. We want to, Prespis agreement's been signed. It's North
Yep.
Macedonia now, right?
hmm
So back then it was Fyrom, and it was when their current guy, Nikolai Gruevsky, had said it was Macedonia, and the Bush administration had recognized it as Macedonia.
mm
And, everyone was up in arms. And I remember communion was getting served, and he said, "This is for Orthodox Christians, except those of the Church of the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia." I was like, "Oh my god," but that was it.
Yeah.
And I feel like with Orthodox in general, there is a lot more introspective focus, if that makes sense. There is that tradition of, I believe, anyways. But I don't know. What am I? I'm not a
The
theologian, but there's
hesychasm.
is that what it is called? Just a more
It's
inward.
like, yeah, I think that's hesychasm. Yeah, like silence and
Yeah,
the monastic life, like
yeah,
you know
yes.
these sorts of things.
Yeah, I feel like there should be.
And I
I mean, that's the focus I've always grew up with, anyways. But everyone's experience is different.
Yeah, like I mean, there's obviously good things about it. Like
Right.
it's not the worst thing in the
With any
world.
religion, good,
It's
bad, and
so
right.
as a polytheist, the way I look at it is that Orthodoxy is a mystery religion. So mystery religions in the ancient world were initiatic religions like the Eleusinian mysteries, the Orphic mysteries, Mithraism, all these different mystery cults that people would be initiated into for like the Eleusinian Mysteries was to give the promise of a better afterlife. So, people think that Christianity is this unique religion that is the first time that people get like salvation and a better afterlife. It's not. It's basically a Hellenistic mystery religion, meaning that it is a synchronism and it's a blending of Greco-Roman and Judaic themes and Egyptian.
You're going to offend a lot of Orthodox Christians, right, Angel?
It's the truth, though. It's the truth. Jesus is the
Just
Onisos. Jesus is the Onisos. Panagia is every single goddess that you want her to be at any moment. And Jesus is
yeah, I mean,
any
I
like
do understand where you're
yeah.
coming from, but
Like for
perhaps
example, I like this example in Cyprus. There was a temple of Aphrodite in Cyprus where people, the women would go there for fertility issues. And on that site where that temple was, there's a monastery, and her name, the Panagia there is called Panagia Aphroditisa.
yeah, there's probably a temple there before
Yeah,
Aphrodite.
there was, and they built
Yeah.
the monastery over the temple, and the women still go to this place for fertility issues. And the
Yeah.
icon of this Panagia has pomegranates on her,
Yeah,
and that's one of the things
which
of
is a
it. So it's like,
fertility thing. Yeah, in
yeah, so I'm
Mani,
like, so
in
this is
Mani,
continuity to change.
we have churches that still have the symbols, the pagan symbols on the stones built into the churches, but it makes sense. It makes sense because
That's called Spolia.
you had all
Yeah,
these. Right, you had all these temples to all these gods. Now the new gods are here. We need building material,
Yeah.
they
and
they had
also,
to repurpose things.
right, you had to repurpose things. And how am I going to sell this to the masses? You have to think of it from the elite top when you're statecrafting and
Yeah.
building culture, as usually comes from the top down. Oh, I mean, whatever. It's another debate or whatever. But
Mhm.
how am I going to do this? Oh, we're going to incorporate some things to this, and
Right.
Yeah.
it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting, and it's interesting to hear you from
That
a
would be a conversation
polytheist.
for another podcast.
I know, and it's interesting hearing you
Um,
from your point of view too as a
Yeah,
polytheist. I mean,
it's a Hellenistic mystery religion that just is toxic because it wanted to be exclusive and deny the other religions their existence. So
yeah,
in
but
that
you
sense,
wouldn't
it's
say
toxic.
polytheism doesn't have that component either. I don't.
In what
I'm asking. I
component?
seriously
Which
do not
component?
know. Like
Which component?
that the other people are like damned per se.
No,
There's not that in polytheism.
no.
That's interesting. I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
When we talk about persecutions, the Romans sometimes persecuted like Dionysian cults because they were a little rambunctious and they did nocturnal rituals. So sometimes the Romans didn't like anything that upsetted the political order. So if you were kind of a little bit of, if you were seemed as upsetting the society in any way, they'll come after you. So there was at one point they kind of expelled, I think, the Dionysian cults from Rome at some point for a while, for a little bit. But other than that, it's not because your God isn't real or you have the wrong religion. It's just that you're a little bit disruptive.
Right, but you think it was really they were? I mean, I get what you're saying, but like the driving purpose of why they were like martyred, quote unquote, killed or whatever was because of their religion.
Who?
I'm not saying like Christian saints and stuff like that. Right?
I'm losing you. Who was martyred? You talk about Christian martyrdom?
Yeah, like early
A
Christian
lot of that
martyrs and
is
saints.
a lot of that's just fake stories. The martyrdom
Okay.
story. Those stories come later. The hagiography. Those things are like a lot later on, and
Yeah,
persecution of the Roman Empire was minimal, and at some point and some time a little bit more, but it was very tiny. It wasn't. There's a book called The Myth of Persecution. I am.
Yeah, you have
I'm
to. I'll have to
but
check it
it's
out.
this idea of the Christians in the Colosseum being eaten by lions is fiction.
What?
So you want to talk
That's
about
interesting.
persecution? Which religion came out on top at the end, and which one?
Right.
Which one which one got destroyed? Which we have statues of Aphrodite with crosses carved into her head, and temples in ruin. So
It's
who got
because
persecuted?
it was a very loving God, is what you're saying,
Yes, we're
Angelo.
loving God. Yes.
I
Ran
just
by
want
people
to.
that are not the most loving, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to make a comment relating to something Angelo said about like the troublemakers and stuff like that, and also what you guys were talking about with orthodoxy not being like political type of thing. I think that might be a reason that more people are coming to orthodoxy, is because it's not a quote unquote like troublemaking religion or anything like that. It's not in the news and like stuff like that where they're making these huge claims or
Right, but now they're
promoting a
turning it into
certain.
that, though. I feel like,
Yeah,
I do feel like it's gonna
so
Right.
I
slowly
think
move that way.
so yeah, so
But
this is
this
prior,
is a good
maybe.
time. This is a good time, though, to what we're talking about actually with cultural
Right.
this,
appropriation.
this yeah
Honestly,
this so this kind of ties into, okay, going back to the pagans. So again, because in this country, the Christianity in this country really defines a lot of the politics here and what's going on. And this is very important for us to talk about because of what's going on right now with the rise of Christian nationalism in this country. It's a very real threat, and it's here, and we need to understand what's going on. And again, like I said before, Greeks, to understand their context and to really understand how they fit into narratives and things. And this could be about anything. This can go from the politics to, Hercules in Disney. It goes everywhere. So I remember, years during, I guess it was Trump's first presidency, and he was doing a campaign somewhere, and Melania was saying the Lord's Prayer at a rally. And my uncle was sitting there going, "Oh, I like to see my religion being represented here." And I had to explain to him that his religion is not being represented here because he is not the attendant audience. Melania on
right?
stage wailing.
Exactly.
Exactly. So it's about who the audience. And I said to him, I go, whoever's in the audience, whatever state they are in, I don't know where it was at the time, but it could be anywhere basically in
Right.
middle of
And by
America.
audience, for the listeners, you don't mean literally the audience. You mean who's that meant for?
Who's that
Right.
meant for, that message?
Yeah.
Her saying the Lord's Prayer is not meant for Orthodox people. It's meant for probably the evangelicals and that base of voters.
Right. Maybe
Um,
conservative Catholics, perhaps. Even
yes.
that's probably a
And
stretch.
he didn't quite understand it until when Trump lost the election, and I showed him videos of people, I think it was like in Arizona or somewhere, these Christians with like the Trump flag around them, wailing at the voting center, like praying to God or something like that. They were doing
crazy
these
tongues
crazy
and shit.
things.
Yeah.
And I said to him, "Oh, these are the Christians that Melania was saying the Lord's Prayer to."
Right.
And he's like, he goes, "These aren't Christians." I go, "These are Christians. These are the Christians in this country. And
Right.
they would persecute you for having the wrong type of Christianity if
Absolutely.
they could."
These people do not, I think people need to understand that to evangelicals, we sound like, or as Orthodox Christians, our way of prayer sounds like the Orthodox call or the Muslim call to prayer to them. There is no distinction. And as someone who's been called, the sand N-word multiple times, I have a old lady in my backyard. I live down here in Florida. She's called my wife and I Muslims on several occasions. And I'm not saying like
What?
offense, like I hate Muslims or anything like that. I'm just not Muslim. But it just
It,
shows the
it
arrogance.
it shows how they
The
other
ignorance.
people. You get
Right.
othered. As a Greek, we get othered. So
Right.
now we can go into conversations about white supremacy and things like
Right.
this. And because we are Greeks in America, our experience in the diaspora is very different from Greeks in other diaspora communities such as Canada, the UK, and Australia.
I think
And
Canada, I think they get it over there too. Wouldn't
I
you
think
say?
I think, okay, so put Canada at the end of the list, but like the UK and Australia, Greeks did not integrate, weren't forced to assimilate like they do here in America, where because in Australia, if you're Greek, you're a wog. That's the term.
Oh, is that what that term is? The
That's like,
WOG or whatever.
yeah, that you're a wog,
What
and
does that
that's not.
stand for?
I don't know, but it's like an ethnic slur. It's basically
Here, I'll
they're
tell
not
you.
white. Greeks aren't white in Australia.
It says a
I mean,
person who is not white.
that's all it
Yeah,
stands for. That's all it says.
person
Yeah.
not white. So they're wogs. So if I'm in America, I'm considered white, but if I go to Australia, I'm not white. Like these things are the boundaries of this, like this idea of whiteness is subjective based on where you are, and Greeks, when we get Southern Europeans collectively, so Greeks, Italians, and other people, when we came to the United States, we weren't considered white. We were treated differently. And
Yeah.
we were persecuted by the KKK.
Right. Literally what a HEPA was
And that's why the
partly
HEPA was
made on.
created.
Yeah.
Yeah, the HEPA was created to combat this and to assimilate us into whiteness.
Right. But
And
that was their method, was assimilation,
Yeah.
assimilation into whiteness. So
because
change
that
your
was more
names.
likely to fix it instead of actually fighting the
Yeah,
racism.
yeah, instead of fighting for your,
Well,
you
they
know,
they even did it with naming their churches. They made them more like Holy Trinity, Holy this, instead of Aya Paraskevi or Saint Catherine or whatever. Like
Yeah, yeah,
they
yeah.
made it lighter
you
and
had
more
to
approachable.
present yourself in a way that removed anything that was othering about you, and
Right.
appealing and digestible to the white people. And you also have to remember, in this country, the only, like, you either Christian or Catholic for a long time. Like, if you were in the military and you died, your cross, you either had like two options. It was like a regular,
Star
like,
of
Christian cross,
David
or
or a
no, I
cross.
mean, for like Christians, there's only two
Oh,
types of Christians like recognized that you can have like imprinted on onto your monument, and it was either like a regular Christian cross or a Catholic cross or something. It was like
interesting.
they didn't have something for Greeks, so they would categorize us under the Catholic then
Mm.
for a long time. So like there's like these dichotomies, and but going back to, like, I guess, whiteness, we assimilated, or the HEPA, facilitated the assimilation to us into whiteness, and so that's why you have, we have double names, Costa is Gus, or Yorgos is George now, and all these different other names. We're given American names, and it's interesting to see there's actually a reversal on that in current generations, like my cousins and stuff like that, family members, their children, they're giving their kids the Greek names again.
Mm.
Yeah.
We're not doing the Americanized versions anymore.
Well, because it's probably like to reject the idea of the assimilation, because after a couple generations, once you go from Nico to Nick to
Yeah,
something else,
yeah.
you lose that identity, and people are looking for identity
Right.
now,
They're
so
trying to
they're
Well,
kind
grab
of
back on.
they don't.
bucking
Yeah,
back.
they
Right.
want to preserve it
Exactly.
again. Yeah.
No, you
So
got it. Exactly. They're trying
and
to
so
grab on to anything that might be left.
Correct, because after 3 or 4 generations, if you still have a Greek last name, but you don't have any connection to it because you didn't go to church, and you have
Right.
3 or 4 generations of marriage into a different ethnicity or whatever,
Right.
but you
Right.
still have the last name, you have no connection
Yeah.
to it.
You're
So people are
Catholic.
they're
Yeah.
trying to grab back onto it, which is a great thing, but
Mhm.
and they might get questioned like, what your last name, what is it? Oh, it's Greek. Oh, what do you do with your Greekness? They're like, oh,
Oh.
nothing, I don't have
Mhm.
anything. So
Right.
people might
Yeah.
try to fix that by embracing it again.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one thing. I think other things too play a big role, like technology. Like, back then, I'll tell you a crazy story just to show how insane things were back then. I had a great uncle, my grandpa's older brother, two older brothers came to America in like the 20s through Ellis Island or whatever. And they left when my dad's dad was 7 or 8. So they left, they went to America. My dad's dad didn't see his older brother again from like 1920, whatever, 5 or whatever, until 1988 when he
Wow.
visited my dad and he visited his older brother at his graveyard, at his tombstone of his older brother.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was different.
Yeah.
You couldn't talk as much easily on the phone. They would get letters,
Yeah.
once every Christmas, and there'd be like $1 or $2 in
Yeah,
an
I
envelope.
remember. So, like, with my family, my father was off the boat, from Greece, and my mother's lineage, all my mother's side came here from, through Ellis Island. So one set of grandparents came from Cyprus, I think around the time the Ottoman Empire fell. Either right before or shortly after. That's when they split Cyprus,
Hmm.
and left and came here, and the other side came from Sparta. And the family, my family from Cyprus is from the north, so now that is
No, good
occupied.
luck.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
Mm.
where my great grandparents in Cyprus came from is now occupied.
right.
So yeah, and so assimilation into whiteness, and going back to, and this is the stuff I wish Greeks knew more about our history, is how we fought the KKK. one of my favorite stories is in Oklahoma City that it was Greeks who disrobed and pulled the hoods off of the KKK to reveal.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Badass.
Yes, I think
I didn't know about that.
if you go on the Pappas post, Gregory posted a long like story about all these things. He collected the sources, so there's an article about it, and it's like the Greeks disrobed and dehood the KKK members and exposed like how they were like prominent people of the town, like mayors or whatever.
Right.
So
Sheriffs.
it's like that I find inspiring. And then in Florida, in the South, like Greeks didn't follow the segregation laws for the Jim Crow laws. They didn't follow them. Like they served black people in
Tarpon Springs that happened.
Tarpon Springs, they would serve them at the counter. They didn't, discriminate that way. And one of the things that is interesting little fact is with the sponge diving. So the Greeks who came here, they came to Florida, they disrupted the economy or the industry down there because we introduced our techniques for diving because, again, we're seafaring people. We're, no stranger to the seas. And we hired and employed, black people when white people wouldn't do that or whatever. So we gave, we helped the black people in Florida. So it's like we have a history of, social justice, you would call today. And
I think a lot of that stems, too, you could even say from the revolution.
Yeah, but also you also have to remember that the people who came here from Greece were also either directly in their experience no persecution themselves.
Right. Good point as well.
How far removed were those Greeks from Ottoman Empire and second-class citizenship themselves? Their grandparents.
Right, because even until 1912, most of Greece was still under the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
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 The bulk of it. Almost the entire Greek state aside from the
I'm pretty sure the Greeks that came here are like, what is this bullshit? What is this? Like, what do you mean? Like, I can't serve other people at my diner? What the fuck are you talking about?
It's my fucking diner. Yeah, exactly. What do I give a shit?
And I wish, more Greeks carry that sense of, wanting to do, I guess, more for society a little bit, to care more.
I think it's because they go more far removed from from the oppression and the suffering.
And that is the assimilation into whiteness. Now,
the politics of remembrance or whatever, right? I don't know if that's
so we like to talk a big game about the Greek genocide and this and that, and it's like, okay, so like you as a people have been genocided, so what are you doing for other people who are being harmed and genocided?
Right.
It's like, but this is what happens. White supremacy is built on anti-blackness, and as long as you are not black, you can assimilate into the white power structure easily. The more adjacent you are to whiteness, it is easier for you to just assimilate and then get sucked into ideologies that are bad. And I see it in my own family, the people around me, and like for me, I don't identify as white.
I think as a Greek in America, you shouldn't identify as white.
Because for me and how I look at that, what does it mean to be white in America? It means to be a descendant of the colonizers. That's what it kind of was when you look at it back in history, when it said like what did they mean in the South when they said whites only? Who were they really referring to? The people who colonized this country. Those people, those white people.
I mean, I think it depends. I think it was more. I think white means more than just that. Like, I do think a part of it is the aesthetic of the color of the skin. Obviously, economic class also played a role. And that's really like the $1 million question is, what does it mean to be white?
Yeah. Right. In America, what does it mean to be white? Because what it means to be white in America isn't the same in Australia. Because again, they're on WOG in Australia.
Right. And I think they had to be more accepting of what they would accept as white as time went on, because we had immigration and people from Europe coming to replace, the labor force and everything like that. So they had to be more accepting in order to maintain and preserve white and whiteness.
From a pragmatic standpoint as well.
And they let people into those categories. They start broadening over time what it means to be white to like now include Egyptians.
Well, yeah, because I think because it's economic factors, though.
It's
Sure.
economic, but the thing is also it's also to
Plays a
preserve their
role.
power as well, because the stats, the statistics shows that whites will be a minority in this country by 2040. I think I've heard a stat like that.
I
And
know,
so for the
but by then there's so many Mexicans that will be white. I mean, you've seen it in
Assimilated.
America. Right. There are Mexicans that were voting for, Trump and MAGA and all over the place. You're not going to call them white. I mean, they might not be considered white, but they definitely believe they're white.
white adjacent, I guess at this point, there's that adjacent category
Like I
of,
talked to one time this third or fourth generation Mexican girl, a coworker, looked very Mexican, whatever that means to me anyways. Her
Mhm.
name was, I don't know, like very Mexican name, like Maria something, Hernandez something. Okay, Mexican. I said, oh, she lived in Texas. She goes, and I go, oh, you're Mexican. She, like, do you speak Spanish? She goes, no. Like, I'm like, you eat good Mexican? She goes, no, like, we're third, fourth generation. We're like very white. And that's what she told me.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Like, what do you
culturally,
say to that?
Right.
she's American now.
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
and that's
American
the
with
way it should be, kind of.
American with Mexican descent, basically.
Right, and that's kind of I feel like the way it should be. Like, and of course, we know that all these things are pushed for fear mongering and for political purposes, obviously. But it's complicated.
It's almost a self-hatred you have to develop for where you came from in order to get to that next level and in order to achieve that
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah,
ideal. You
that's
have to hate where you came from, give it up in order to get that ideal and really prosper here.
yeah,
That some people have to do.
Yeah, that's definitely one jumping board you could use or one avenue. But I just think, the environment here is, like ultimately, people have differing beliefs, but I believe America is just a place to make money. Like we
That's how a lot
haven't.
of people feel. Yeah.
I mean, and how else can you treat it? Like, there's no like, do we really have an American culture?
We
And if
do.
not, that's
I mean,
fine. I
there
mean, people,
is.
this is debatable.
There
Yeah,
is.
like I've had this debate, and some people say we do and we don't.
We have multiple cultures and like multiple concurrent American cultures. Like if you're from the South has a very distinct
Yes,
culture,
the
a
Midwest has its own
cuisine.
culture
The
for sure,
Midwest, the Northeast, like
for sure.
it's
Yes.
not just one American culture. We have, a civic sort of, religion. We have civic religion. So when you study religion, when you talk about things like, the way certain things are set up, in our country, there's a thing called civic religion. How we treat, for example, things like the Constitution as a sacred document, but it's not sacred. It's a political thing, but it's treated with reverence. So this is like the secular sort of religious things of America. We do have, a national identity, something that connects us together. It has to be activated at some point. You know what I mean? Like 4th of July, for example, like everyone's doing, it doesn't matter what you are, but you're all probably making a burger and a hot dog and watching fireworks and
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter what your background is. That's the
Sure,
American.
yeah. I mean,
You
I get
know?
what you're saying. It kind of, I mean, I'd have to reread it, but I don't know if anyone's in
But then
comparative
also the values
politics.
of the country too. So that, what are
Mhm.
the values of this country? Are do we value democracy? Do we value, equality? Like what are the values of the country? That's also part of the culture.
I think economic prosperity is the biggest,
Yeah.
honestly.
Opportunity.
Yeah.
Opportunity, social mobility. It's supposed to be anyway. Social
It's
mobility is
supposed to
supposed to
be.
be a big,
To quote George
yeah,
Carlin, it's called the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe in it.
right. You know what I mean? Yeah, and I mean, that was passed down by, some of the people that espouse that the most are like kind of boomers in that generation, but they're oblivious to the fact that they were in a country and they came to be in a country when the rest of the world was bombed to shit post
Yeah.
World War II.
And the entire system was designed to facilitate their support in any way possible.
Right, and there was
Yeah.
an entire class of disenfranchised people. I mean, you could make the argument that America wasn't even a real democracy until post Jim Crow. And I
Mhm.
think a very strong one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
Like
interesting.
how could you seriously claim that that's a serious quote unquote democracy if you have entire, disenfranchised segment of your population?
Of course.
So I don't
Well,
know. I mean, that's
it's like
another thing
Athens, like classical Athens, democracy, but only
for
m-
men, landowners, or
male
whatever.
Athenian citizens had the right to vote.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
Landowners, didn't they have to own land too?
His
Or
own land,
in
maybe,
America.
maybe. No, in ancient
America.
Athens.
No, as long as you were just a citizen, you
Athenian
didn't have to
citizen.
own land.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's funny. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, they're very loaded. I mean, and you could have a whole nother episode about any of these side topics, but that's the real crux of it. And and somehow, I mean, not somehow, I do think it all ties back to our culture and as Greeks and as diaspora Greeks, our experiences in America, and how that culture is being adopted by other people that are either seeking culture, have cultural anxieties.
Yes, going
I don't
back
know what it
to
is exactly. It's being
yeah.
driven a
So
lot by media. Sorry to talk over you.
yeah. Oh, what?
I said sorry to talk over you, but I think it's being driven a
Oh, no.
lot by popular media and
Mhm.
Hollywood and stuff like that. I don't know. Do you think that? Do you think that's a fair statement? That that's the driving force? Like, who knows why these
I
people pursue these things?
I mean, I think because America is a melting pot, and again, looking at the way this country was created, who came here, and how people like when people came here to this country, like the settlers or people as they later came to colonize and whatnot, they were coming to this country to get a fresh start and to leave behind where they came from. So a lot of people were actively seeking to um, leave behind whatever they came from, and they want to
Of
be something
course.
new.
Which in
So you
many
have
cases
this,
wasn't a good situation.
yeah,
Right.
you know. So, and you'll see that with people who, I remember I was talking with somebody at work years ago, and I was like, "Oh, like, what's your background?" She goes, "I'm American." And I'm like, "Okay, but like,
Yeah.
it's like saying I'm a burger." I'm like, "Well, what kind? Like a cheeseburger, a bacon cheeseburger? Like, there's
Right.
more to it than that. Like, there's more ingredients." I'm like, "What's your like?" Well, my family's from Ireland, but I'm not Irish. I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "This is, I gotcha."
Yeah.
So, but it's
Yeah. We'll stop this conversation now. I'm sorry I bothered you so much.
Right.
yeah, I'm so sorry to ask about your background because I like to like connect with people culturally and to like know
Right.
who you are and your history. I like to know people's history.
Right.
I find it fascinating to like know where you come from, what's your story, what's like
Hmm.
this is what makes people interesting.
Yeah. No,
Um,
100%.
but going back to where I'm trying to go with this is that when you let go of these things of antiquity, these things these things have antiquity to them. Your identities, your customs, your superstitions, your language, your dances, your clothing, all these things. These When you get rid of that to become American and adopt American ways, you kind of lose a part of yourself, and
Yeah.
eventually down the line, people are going to start seeking something out to fill that in. And you
Yes.
I
can,
love that.
Yeah.
I love
yeah,
I think
and
that makes a lot of sense.
there's a history to this in this country, like transcendental meditation. I think it was like from India, came here in the 50s, and people got into that, and like you just see trends and waves of different modalities and ideas and things come and go, and people latch onto it and go to the next thing and whatnot. And I think people are looking for something, um, different, exotic. They're looking for something to spark the imagination.
Yeah.
They're
And
looking for
meaning.
something to in meaning, and they're looking for. I think part of it too is they're looking for a little bit of an enchantment in their lives because I find. Because now we talk about disenchantment of the world, like with the industrial revolution and technology and stuff like that, the world was sort of like disenchanted, meaning that people saw less and less of the supernatural in the world.
Hmm.
Instead of spirits in the woods, it's there's no spirits in the woods. There's
Right.
a lot less magic in the world. It's
There's raccoons in
machines.
the woods. Get a grip.
Yeah, it's just the raccoons. You know what I mean?
Whimsy is a good word.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
Right.
guess. Yeah. And then you add that in with a Christianity in this country that has no ritualism. Now again, when we talk about orthodoxy, one of the things that when I say that orthodoxy is a Hellenistic mystery religion, I'm saying that not in a negative way for Christians to understand. For the Orthodox listeners who hear that, it's actually a positive thing because when we talk about changing continuity, Um, and when I talk to other Christians and stuff like that, and these things, everything we talk about, and I'm saying have interconnecting webs. So when I would fight with pagans, and when it comes to Hellenism and like just ancient Greek religion and certain things, they would say to me, "You don't know anything, or Greeks don't know anything about the ancient world, or anything pertaining to maybe a mindset or a way of behavior or thinking anything. They would say we have no advantage whatsoever over anyone else when it comes to these topics.
Who
We're
would
not
say this?
the pagans. That
Oh, that's.
we don't have
I'm
any
joking.
sort of maybe we have no sort of maybe I don't know knowledge or experience or something that they might see as an advantage over them because
Like
we're not
authority over
even
the
just
topic.
authority, but just like my experience as a Greek somehow, it might lend to me some sort of insight that they can't get because they're not Greeks. They don't like that. They find that to be either nationalistic, or there's a term they use, focused, or all sorts of things. There's so much to
Ethnocentrist or
talk about.
whatever.
My point is they say to you, we're all Christians. You were Christianized. We were Christianized. And I'm just like, your version of Christianity is very different than the kind that the Greeks had throughout the centuries. And
Mhm.
because it was a mystery cult, Christianity is a Hellenistic mystery religion. That means that Greeks today have experienced some form of a mystery religion, and that is something that connects us to antiquity.
Right. Like,
So we understand, we have an experience with ritualism, with sort of orthopraxies, how to do certain things. We have in churches people will bring the medallions of like body parts for healing. I forgot that dama
the
are they
saints.
called? No,
I don't know
the
that. I know when you
uh,
like bring a piece of gold or whatever if you want to really. I know what
I
a
think they're
dama is,
called
but
the they're like little. You can go to like a store, and it's like a plaque or whatever. It'll have like an arm, an eye. I think they're
I've seen it. Yeah, I know what you're
And
talking about. I've seen it
people will
before.
bring them to the church. They'll leave it at the icon and pray for healing. That
Right.
is a direct continuation of an ancient Greek practice at the temples for Asclepius and the healing centers. People would dedicate these clay or arm parts, whatever, for the success of healing, or for prayer for
Yes.
healing. This is a direct continuation
And there's
of
other
an
stuff.
ancient practice.
There's other stuff too,
There's so
even more in
much. There's so
religion.
much. There's
My
so
dad,
much.
when they
But
used to make soap in the village, they used to take a rock and they used to put
Mhm.
a rock in the river to have the soap. Don't ask me why, but have the soap imitate the rock from the river, and it's some kind of ancient,
Hmm.
Mhm.
pagan polytheist thing. I don't know
I haven't
exactly.
heard that one. But like
Yeah.
things like that, and like when the certain ritualisms of sort of things like for Anastasia at midnight, when everything gets dark, and then the light comes out and the light spreads the force, like
Hmm.
these sorts of ritualisms and themes of the darkness and the light, and there's this image of this priest coming out with like two blazing candles, these blazing torches. I
Hmm.
forgot. I don't know if it was for Anastasia or a different type of service, but like that sort of thing. When I see that, I go, "This is like mystery religion stuff." These the torches, and um, so there's things that we have seen as Greeks that do come from antiquity, that are directly from antiquity. That is very different from somebody who's an evangelical or Protestant. The Protestant Reformation was built on the idea that Catholicism is all paganism to begin with, and we have to get rid of all those things and just go with Scripture alone.
Mm.
So, like that,
Oh wow.
you're talking about Christians without rituals.
Yeah, I mean, the ritual stuff, all that stuff is a little over my head, so I don't want to talk to it because I'm sure I'll get
Hmm.
something incorrect.
But I mean, it
But
adds
with the meaning,
yeah, it's the these rituals are very important because it just it speaks to so much. It's supposed to give you an experience. It's
right?
to facilitate experience. You don't get just experience by just reading words. You have to see things and contemplate on those things that you see and hear. You could be an Orthodox. I think it's very easily for you to be an Orthodox Christian and not read the Bible or be taught theology, and just go and listen and experience what you see, and then
Right. Of
contemplate on
course.
that, and then
Because there's
develop
a
something
spiritual
out of it.
aspect to it that I feel like
Yeah.
You don't get as much.
Experiential, yeah.
Yes,
Experiential. These are what rituals do.
experiential.
They facilitate experiential. These experiences are supposed to give you insight, meaning, or something. It stirs something in the
Right.
soul,
There's a reason for the
and
incense. There's a reason for the
there's a
psaltery and the
reason that it's supposed
chants.
to
There's a reason
transport
for it
you out
all.
of the mundane into a sacred
Right.
space where
Right.
you can shift your consciousness to,
Right. Get closer
to
to
another
God.
state. Yeah, and
Find
I
peace.
feel like
Whatever. Yeah.
a lot of the other Christian denominations that have removed these rituals, and what do you have now? You have pastors at podiums yelling about political issues. They
Yeah.
just
Right.
yelling and
In a
condemning.
white room with
Oh,
nothing to
yeah,
look at,
Right.
nothing to
The most
feel.
boring.
just
Yeah. The most boring
nothing.
So you
environment
have to be
ever.
dialed. You have
Yeah,
to just dial into what he's saying,
and
Yeah.
they're
what
just
she's
going
saying.
off on whatever they're ranting. It's like it's just it's I'm like, what is this? And this is what a lot of Americans have been exposed to. So I think it's very important to understand where they're coming from with when they think of Christianity. That's what they think of. They think of a very sterile environment. They think of preachers preaching condemnation and all this stuff, and
Right. You're gonna go to
and
hell.
you're gonna go to hell. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of that, and then there's also good people who there's good Christian. I love Quakers. Quakers are some of my favorites.
Yeah.
I never Quakers never bothered anyone.
Right.
I can't find an instance of a Quaker who made someone upset about something.
Hmm.
But this is the and so this is why you got a lot of people coming to the Greek gods. Now, they're looking for divinity that is not traumatizing, I think. They're looking for a connection to divinity that
Interesting.
isn't this Christian harmful religion that they've been exposed to. So they
I mean,
want
do you
something, they want
blame
an
them
experience.
if you were
Huh?
evangelical? I said, would you blame them if you were raised in an evangelical church? Like we take for granted. I don't know. I
We
feel
take
like
for
yeah, we do. We take for granted our culture, and I know you're polytheist. You're not Greek Orthodox, but you're raised in
Yeah, but I
Greek
was
Orthodox.
raised in it, so I experienced
Familiar
it.
with
Like I
it, yeah.
experienced Easter, I experienced Anastasia, I experienced, people's baptisms, I experienced going to church and looking around at the icons and kind of like, what is that? I go, oh, those are seraphims up there. Like I knew what they
Right. There's a
were. Like
cherub,
like
seraphim, whatever, all that stuff.
and
Yeah.
I would stare at the icons and just look at them, just to like and just kind of just what do I feel from it, I
Right.
guess, or
Right. Right.
or
Right.
just the presence of the Jesus Pantocrator on the top,
Yeah. At
that
the top.
overwhelming this overwhelming figure above you, and like the eyes and
Right. With the
looking
four
at you, and
gospels and the
yeah,
lion, the dove, whatever, all that stuff.
it is an interesting experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but unfortunately, not my cup of tea at the end of the day.
Yeah. No. Well, it's free country,
So
Angela.
for people who didn't even have that sort of experience, there's nothing for them to look at, or all they hear is somebody preaching, condemnation and all these things. People search out other things to fill in the spiritual gap. And this is where people go to things like, polytheism, paganism. They go to Buddhism. They go to Scientology. They go to
Right.
Yeah.
Good
they go
point.
to you get people go to, and people are going to Orthodoxy. People in America are going towards Orthodoxy as well because it's filling in something that they're missing. And there's a negative side to this because for a lot of people, I think they view Christianity as weak, as
Right.
effeminate, as non-masculine. It's not a really masculine religion.
And they
And
view
so a lot of
orthodoxy as strong,
Russian,
unchanged.
particularly going to Russian-based
Right.
orthodoxies.
Right.
And so you see a lot of converts to the Russian Orthodox Church because it's seen to be masculine, manly, ancient, authoritative, unchanging. There's a sense of tradition. They
Yeah.
Right.
want something that hasn't been changed. That Catholicism had Vatican I and II. A lot of things had changed. They got rid of Latin Mass and they speak in the vernacular of where they are. So in America, they speak in English in Catholic churches instead of Latin. There's a lot of things they've changed. So people
Mhm.
have looked at that and said, how can this be, the true church if you keep changing things, or you radically have changed things? And they look at Orthodoxy with the idea that this is something that is unchanged, which,
Right.
Yeah.
that's
Right.
not
There's
fully accurate, but,
yeah, we're
we
not
never had
prostrating like
Vatican
we
I and
used to,
II.
you know.
Yeah, we never had those sorts of Vatican I, II issues where, you know, So they
purgatory, no
this is
purgatory, back and
this is
forth.
their
Yeah.
perception though. But again, it's not the issue isn't about what is the reality, what is the perception of people. Why are they doing the things that they're doing? Because they perceive something. They perceive that
Right.
orthodoxy offers people a traditional, unchanging religious experience that is, not going to be subjected to the woke,
Yeah,
ideology that they're so
Yeah.
scared of. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they're not going to the Greek churches typically. They think it's too
Yeah.
liberal.
I mean, there's definitely not as many. I've ran into the Orthodox converts. I have a friend who's converted like over like 150 people to Orthodoxy, some
Mhm.
Greek, some not. And, one time I went to their church. They had like a mission or whatever where they were like starting up a church, and it was all non Greeks. Like, I mean, it honestly was amazing to like see. I was like very like impressed and inspired and all that. And I was talking to the priest who was, I forgot, he might have been like distantly Greek or Ukrainian or something like that. He's like, you can always tell the difference between the converts and the non-converts, the people that are born, because the converts have a hard time venerating icons.
Mhm. Yeah.
He's like, you guys venerate, and it's something you're like, what do you mean? You just go up to it, you do your stavra, you don't worship it, you know,
Yeah.
but you give it respect. That's the name,
Yeah.
veneration, right?
Yeah.
He's like, a lot of converts have a hard time understanding that.
Yeah, because they didn't
And
grow up with it.
yeah, and we take it for granted. I mean, a lot of this stuff, I really do. We feel like, we
Yeah,
take
and
it
that
as
carries
diaspora
over like
Greeks.
into my polytheism because I have statues and like how I treat my statues, what they mean to me. And a lot of that dialogue too, I guess in orthodoxy because of iconoclasm, because there were periods in the history where there were iconoclasts who busted the icons and said we shouldn't have them, and people
Right.
said
Who was
no,
it
we
with
should have them. Like,
Theodora, or I forgot,
yeah,
the emperor or
yeah, so
whatever.
you have theologians, arguing why it's okay to have images, and I think they drew a lot from probably Platonism to argue these things. So, you can never like escape the Greeks,
Right.
one way or another. Um, but yeah, so I'm trying to see how this all like how we thread these threads together again because like going back to the pagans. Now, with the pagans, and what you see in paganism is a very left political orientation in that, and so a lot of people are going to Hellenic polytheism, thinking that it is a like an oasis of like leftist sort of ideals, or it's the antithesis to Christianity, which they think is everything bad. So it's again how do people box things and label things and what they think is the antithesis to that. So they think of Christianity as negative, it's hurtful and traumatizing, and this over here is the opposite of that. It is comforting. It is embracing. It is whatever I really want it to be. It's free, like it's free
Hmm.
from dogma. It's free from orthodoxy. It's free from any sort of obligations. That's the word. It's free from obligations and responsibilities of any sort. You can kind of do with it as you please. That's kind of the perception.
yeah,
Yeah.
And I'm not
I get
saying
that.
yes or no. I'm not saying yes or no to these things. I'm just saying that's what I think is their perceptions of these things.
No, I get it for sure. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think it really ties back to really what's driving, like that
Yeah.
Reddit chat, and what's
Yeah.
driving people to
Yeah.
seek polytheism and in the process
Yeah.
culturally appropriate. And, some of this stuff is driven by things we talked about, seeking, a different space, seeking meaning,
Yeah.
seeking culture, whatever. Some
Yeah.
of it, I think, is driven from, I mean, I don't even know. I mean, it's cultural appropriation in a different way. And I don't know if you want to get into like Hollywood stuff, like the whole
We can go into
Cleopatra thing.
Hollywood too. I think these things will all weave together somehow.
Let's get into this as well, because I feel like this is another hot topic that definitely Greeks are up in arms as they should be. We'll start off with Cleopatra. We can move into other stuff. We can move into just
Yeah, let's do
cultural appropriation.
Cleopatra because this
Yeah,
ties into
let's do Cleopatra.
Cleopatra ties into what I've been talking about in previous conversations. See, everything ties in together. Like I said, everything will connect somehow because
Hmm.
it's all interconnected. Do you want to talk about the Cleopatra thing in particular, like what is
I'm just gonna say really.
Netflix's Cleopatra?
Yeah, I'm just gonna say not mean stuff, but I'm just gonna be extremely critical
So
of it. It was produced by
what's
Jada
what
Pinkett
what are people upset? Why are Greeks upset about Cleopatra?
because it's historically incorrect. Basil, you want to say something?
No, go ahead.
Because it's not reality.
Mm-hmm.
It's not reality. It's Afrocentric.
Yeah.
But it's Afrocentric, and then and I think it does a disservice as well to the African American community because you have great films that could do things like show the struggle of African Americans in America. Mind you, there's tons of badass stories, historical stuff of kings and stuff in Africa. There's a whole nother rich culture and history, and I don't know why. Why are they coming after Greek culture? I mean, honestly, like we had talked about this, Angela, it's more that it was framed as a documentary is the thing, more than anything else,
This is the
right?
thing. Yeah.
This is
So
really the real thing.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So I think so again, Netflix's Cleopatra, which presents itself as a documentary, but again, it's a drama documentary. So there's it's theatrical. They have theatric scenes in it. So it's like a TV show, but then they insert the scholars to talk about or people who dialogue, and so
Right.
it's
Kind of like
entertainment.
Rome. If you ever watched the Rome series on, I think it was it Netflix or
Yes.
HBO,
Yes, that was
similar to
pretty
that.
good. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
Rome's
a pretty
awesome.
good. They had a great set. They had a great set. But the problem with that is that it's because it presents itself as a documentary. You need to really then say we're going to present history accurately and not try to have an agenda. And to your point that it is Afrocentric, and now again for speaking, I guess to the Greek audience and anyone, everyone else too, but specifically to the Greek audience because, like I said before, we had to understand the context to things that. When it comes to Greek history and Greek culture, when it's presented and used in the media or it's talked about, we aren't considered. We aren't the audience. We are never
Right.
the audience.
Right.
In America, Greek people are never the intended audience for anything that is related to anything Greek. It's for everyone else.
Yep.
And so in America, because of the racial tensions here between whites and blacks, white supremacy, and the history of slavery here and segregation and discrimination, these issues get played out and worked through lots of times through history, through parallels, that people want to tell stories by finding a parallel in the past, and also to also maybe that's on a good end, like we just want to find a story and kind of show you a different version of what we're experiencing at a different point in time so that you can maybe digest and understand what we're going through right now
Mm-hmm.
in a indirect sort of way using history. But you're saying it's a documentary, so this is a problem. So the way I look at Netflix's Cleopatra is that they're projecting onto that history the American race tensions between white and blacks, where Rome and Caesar are all the white people, Cleopatra, Egypt are all the black people, and the
Oh, I didn't
struggle
even
between
think about that.
Wow.
yeah, so they're stand-ins. So they're stand-ins. So Cleopatra is supposed to be a strong black female queen of a black country, a black nation, and dealing with Rome, this white imperial power or whatever. Like it's just they're just talking about American race issues using Cleopatra and Rome as a stand-in, and that's fine if you were doing a movie per se. Like if you're just doing a movie, we do that
Right.
lots of times in movies. The movie Agora many years ago was set in late antiquity in Alexandria, following the story of Hypatia, and the rise of Christianity. And so you find in that movie the struggle between Christian fundamentalism and its antagonism towards Greek pedia, education and science. But they weren't trying to present this movie as like, oh, we're going to tell you the story of how the Christians hurt the Greeks or how Greeks were harmed by Christianity. It's not about that. It's not about that. It was a movie dealing with the themes of the time in the country about I think during that time, new atheism was in full swing, and the polemics about, evolution, trying to teach evolution in schools, and so so as a public, as a people, dealing with the tensions between like things like creationism and religion and fundamentalism versus science and facts and in history, things like that, they used this particular time period to find a parallel and to address those issues and to show people a time and place where it kind of happened before.
So you're saying Greek culture just kind of got used as
Greek culture
in the
is just a stage.
crossfire.
We're just a stage.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So it's not a story about us. It's a story about the tension between science and religion.
Oh, you're saying in Agora.
In Agora, in that
Yeah,
particular
yeah.
thing, it's the conflict between science and religion. That's what that movie's about. It isn't about the Greeks versus the Christians. It isn't about polytheism versus monotheism. It's science versus religion and religious fundamentalism.
How do you feel as a polytheist about chaos with Jeffrey Goldblum?
I thought it was very entertaining.
It is funny. I watched like the first 3 or 4 episodes.
Yeah, I liked it as a series. I'm sad they canceled it.
They canceled it?
Yeah, Netflix they cancel everything. They don't give anything a chance. It's sad. It was a good story. I thought it was a nice adaptation of certain myths for a modern audience.
After one season, wow. It wasn't that bad. The only thing that I was upset about is there was no alluding to Greece being a superpower in this universe, like a global superpower. And I thought, oh man, I was curious if Greece never went Christian, would it have been? I'm joking, kind of, but
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It was a joke about the superpower thing and us not becoming Christian.
Right. Damn it! They should have had an Alexander in that. No.
Yeah.
But before with Cleopatra, So just I guess to wrap that up, it's not history. It's not a documentary. It's just not a documentary. Like we Cleopatra is of Greek descent, from the Ptolemies, with a few, I guess, if you look at the family tree, there's where the mothers, the wives coming from.
Intermarried stuff.
Some of them come from. I think they come from the Seleucid Empire too. So
I thought Macedonian, I believe. She's Macedonian.
But that's where she's descended anyway, because she's of the Ptolemy dynasty. So the Greek Macedonians.
Right.
But then when you have these royal families, you have different empires. You have the Ptolemies, the Seleucids, stuff like that. I think a few of her ancestors, came from that part of the empires of Seleucids, some royal families, stuff like that.
But they did all the marriage between the generals and everything.
But even the thing is though, even if they, let's say they put a black actress in as Cleopatra, let her speak Greek then. Like make her. They don't express the Greekness about her as an Greek Egyptian ruler. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's the thing too. It's like you're erasing the Greekness, emphasizing that she's this black Egyptian fighting the Romans, but have her speak Greek. Have her be dressed in Greek with the diadem, the Greek crown.
I thought this was a documentary.
So it's a documentary. So I don't care, that it's a black actress, but make her Greek.
Yeah, right. They were trying to say outright that she was African.
Just African, black. And and Egyptian.
At one point, there was an old lady in there that said, and I told him that Cleopatra was black. It seemed very, you know what I'm talking about?
My grandmother told me. Yeah, yep. My grandmother told me that Cleopatra was black. I'm like, how's your grandmother know? Like, she a historian?
Yeah. Is your grandmother a historian? Thanks, talking head. Yeah, I appreciate this.
Okay.
I know from the outside, a lot of people will say why you get so heated about something like that. The problem is with stuff like this is that we've had Hollywood and stuff like that for less than 100 years, but there's so many things that they have shaped to think are historically accurate because of their portrayal of things.
Right.
So you'll have things like a movie about ancient Greece. If they did one, everything would be white marble when that wasn't the case. Yeah. It's just our interpretation.
Good point.
Of it.
Yeah.
Or for a while, all these Roman movies would have people speaking in British accents because it's a form of, putting that culture on top or whatever.
Right.
But then you get these past few years, you might have more accurate portrayals where there's diversity in Rome, where there's people of different skin tones, and you have people saying it's woke or whatever.
No, it's
But
accurate.
it's because it's accurate, but it's because we've been conditioned to think these Hollywood interpretations of historical things are historically correct. Even in terms of, foods people eat in movies or flowers or, settings that are not accurate, we get conditioned into thinking are accurate. But, you're removing so many things that make it correct. The diversity, you don't say that Cleopatra was 6% this and then 5% this, and then she was Cleopatra.
Yeah,
so do it as historically.
Queen of Egypt.
You can say it's
of
a
the Ptolemy
creative
dynasty.
Right. This is a creative interpretation of this story.
Yeah.
Totally fine. But once you start saying this is history, then you get these people watching it and their descendants thinking that is correct. And then you get tension. Yeah. And that just creates more tension as time goes on.
Yes.
And because now we're fighting with people, when we would never have a reason to fight with.
Now we're offended. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I can't stand again with the Cleopatra thing is then the Greeks online are going, Cleopatra was white. I'm like, oh my god, you're just making
you're going
it worse.
the opposite direction.
Yeah, you're missing the
making
point.
It worse. Like you're not supposed to
She wasn't white. She was Greek.
She wasn't white. She wasn't black. She wasn't this or that. Like these don't project these are modern labels and identities.
Yeah.
Right.
Like because
this
is why I really want Greeks in the diaspora to understand the context of things, in their context, or just the narratives. So Cleopatra was not white. I think Elizabeth Taylor as Cleopatra is also inaccurate.
Right.
What I mean? I don't.
But that's a product of his time, of Hollywood. She was a big actress. They put her in this role.
Right.
Yeah. And then we think, she was this pale, beautiful goddess, queen, whatever.
Yeah.
And you have to be careful.
Great movie, by the way. Elizabeth Taylor's Cleopatra is great.
And keep in mind too,
we can enjoy it.
You can enjoy the movie, but that's not what Pie Cleopatra looked like, obviously.
And keep in mind, too, there's maybe, 30 million Greeks in the world? How many Greeks are in the U.S.? I don't know, 5, 6? We're not a huge market base.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't care.
What do they care?
They shouldn't care as a financial...
Right, exactly. As a profit-seeking enterprise, why would they give a shit about us?
In the Hercules movie that's going to come out, if they put Ariana Grande as the girl... That would make financial sense because she has a huge base. But she's not going to go up there and claim I'm the depiction of this person.
Right.
You have to understand that some things are for economics, some things are for marketing, and some things are for history.
But there's also
don't take things for face value.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And it's also I want to backtrack, I guess, really quick though to the Afrocentrism thing because I do want to tie up Cleopatra, and you brought up Afrocentrism, and we need to understand that, so Afrocentrism is within the African diaspora in America. With there's this idea that Egypt was a black civilization. It's why is this happening? It's because white people have claimed Greece and Rome as white civilization.
Right.
And so, which isn't true. So there's a lot of things that aren't being spoken about that people don't realize. So if the white people in America, for example, claim that ancient Greece and Rome are their history and they're in their civilization, or they're part of that, or they're the byproduct of that, or they get to claim the achievements of Greece and Rome as their own, then the black people in this country, it's what do we have?
It's reactive.
Egypt. It's reaction. Egypt is a black civilization, and we get to claim Egypt and its cultural achievements as ours. And then that sort of clash between whites, the white people, black people with history, Greece, Rome, Egypt. You get then later on these things like, the Greeks, the white people stole everything from the Egyptians. You get things like that online. You'll see.
Yeah.
Pythagoras didn't invent the theorem. He got it from, Egypt, and he stole it. It's you get so many reactionary things when you have these dichotomies, when you attach, your modern identity, which is just very nebulous, white, black. These are very nebulous categories.
Extremely ambiguous.
Onto civilizations. So I guess
that existed, just doing their thing. They weren't
Right.
They were conquered and then they fell and then they reemerged. Like, they're not worried about that stuff.
Yeah.
It's just...
Yes, I think that's me tying up Cleopatra, I guess, at this point.
Yeah.
I think that's
Good
it.
take.
And then Disney, but like Disney too. So,
Or the new Odyssey movie, you could go down
the new
to
Odyssey
without that.
movie, and so we could just talk about the representation of Greek culture and media. So this is it. In academia, we just call this it's classical reception. How the classics are received in society at any point in time within that society. How is it being received? How is it understood? How is it represented? And it's just how it is. So ancient Greek culture, this history, it's been integrated into the idea of Western civilization. So it's a natural consequence of that this isn't, the sole property of Greek people, where we get to be like, no, you can't do that to that. For some, we could object to things, but the thing is, people don't really care about our objections because I think a lot of people think we're not really Greeks in that sense, that like you don't really get to have a say.
Yeah.
This is
we're
more than
small.
you. This is more than you, and it can be a little bit more than us. I guess, it is what it is. It's just part of the culture in such a way that,
I think the important thing is to be aware of it.
people, I would like people to be more sensitive to these things and aware of like these things are still important to an existing group of people called Greeks.
Yeah.
That we do care, and that we would like sensitivity to these things, like representation. Like I've critiqued this. I go, why is it that, when they did Mulan, that they made sure to cast the actress right, but when it comes to Hercules, who gives a fuck?
Right.
Mm.
And it's not like there's not Greek actors and actresses they could get.
It's not like they can't find it. Like they just, but I understand the politics of it and the history of it. So, in Hollywood, they didn't cast, the proper, ethnic group for the role they were doing. I think John Wayne was playing Genghis Khan.
In what movie? I'm sorry?
In a movie. Like, so they dressed him up and so it's like, that's inappropriate.
Right.
So it's like it's correcting for those mistakes in Hollywood where it's like they would put white people into roles of
Oh my
Chinese.
God, you're right. 1956, The Conqueror, John Wayne was Genghis Khan. They haven't. You look at the picture; it's ridiculous. Wow.
So I understand the history of why it's important today if they're going to do a film, that is rooted in, Chinese history, folklore, or whatnot, to correct their previous mistakes. No problem with that. I get it. I would like, though, when it comes to Greek things, to have a little bit more sensitivity to Greek things, because I would like Greek people to also profit from our culture. I don't want us to be relegated to only big fat Greek wedding movies and diner stereotypes.
We don't want to pass that stewardship on. If we're not going to have stewardship of this, or at least a role, or at least be concerned about this, who is?
Exactly.
Yeah, because in the case of Big Fat Greek Wedding, it was Greek centric, but people could relate to it. So that's possible with more Greek movies. It can be Greek centric, but still be relatable to the mass.
Exactly.
So don't worry about it. Don't worry about hey, I'm picking this actor versus this actor. This one has a bigger presence, but this one's Greek. Take the risk, because it's about the story and it's about the way you present it. You know.
But and also with representation, why is representation important? Is because it's important for the people of that story to step into the role that it represents them. So and also financially to profit. Why don't Greek actors and actresses profit from their history and culture in that way? And it's important, and I don't want us to only be relegated to the stereotypes, or to be the butt of a joke or something. Like, we should be able to be gods and goddesses and kings and queens of our own myths and stories.
Right.
You know what I mean? And because there's prestige. Now, there's another thing that we didn't get to cover, the prestige of classical culture. That's why it's so desired by people, because it has a certain
Right.
level of
Desire to
prestige
be
connected to it.
appropriated.
Yes. The classical aesthetic is an aesthetic of high value. And I remember the ContraPoints on YouTube. She's got a great YouTube channel. She does documentary videos, or docu essays, like, you know, those essay videos. And she did this video, and she talked about again, like, art and there was a statue I think someone made. They made a replica of, you know, the statue of the Three Graces.
Those
And
are
it's
three
like
horses. I don't know.
no, it's just like it's just the I think they're called the three Graces, and it's a statue. It's the three women. They're like in a circle, whatever. But someone recreated it, but made them obese, and people were outraged by that because they didn't like the association of the classical standard of like art with obesity.
Beauty and all that. Gotcha.
And so people say that's, you know, so you're bringing into discussions, what is beautiful, what is this, what is that. And I think in her video, she talked about, and then like Black people also in the classical aesthetic, and why that outrages people, because the white people and white supremacy only wants to associate the classical standard or beauty or aesthetic with whiteness only, and they get outraged when they see Black people being put into that aesthetic, because we elevate that aesthetic in this society. It's an aesthetic that elevates.
Right. In other words, you're saying that they're not upset because Black people are in it. They're upset because white people aren't in it, or whiteism.
Well, no, they are upset Black people are in it, because they don't want to grant onto Black people that which white people deem
theirs
of high value.
Right.
That's exclusive for whiteness.
Right. I get
so
that.
This is why you get anger over, let's say, a god or goddess in a movie being Black, or, you know, just Black people in ancient, you know, Rome and Greek and stuff. Even with Cleopatra too, like this whole stuff. Anytime that Blackness is introduced into things that is viewed or understood to be the domain of only white, it outrages people.
Right.
You know, and so, you know, and that's what a lot of what's being done is a correction of this, because they were there and they've been erased.
And I think with the time that we're in, it's all been amplified and accelerated because of social media and how quick it is. Because I was watching during Christmas the Santa Claus series, and Mother Nature in the movie was a Black woman. I was like, I don't, granted I was younger, but I was like, I don't remember this being a controversy, because it probably wasn't, because we just live in a time where people get angry over things, irrationally angry, that if that movie came out today in the exact same cast, it would have not been released, or it would have been canceled, or whatever. Right. You know, I think we're just living a time where the bubble, our echo chambers and our bubbles are getting so, like, they're filling with steam and they're about to explode because everybody's so angry about so many things.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are, just like you're saying, I mean, there's probably just a lot of other anxieties and stuff, and that these are like the outlets.
Yep.
And on that note, I think we'll end today's episode. I know this is a bit different than the conversations we have at Diogenes Lamp, but I think it's actually a great conversation in line with a lot of the discussions that are had on Hearth of Hellenism. We got Angelo and Basil here, myself, Tom. We really appreciate you guys listening in and touching on these topics. Cultural appropriation, what Hellenism means for us and for others, and a whole slew of other things, as you have heard. So, anything you want to say, Angelo?
Thank you for having me on and giving me the opportunity to talk about these things. There's so much more that can be said. Like these conversations can go on for hours, and
we'll have more in the future, I think, for sure. This isn't going to be
in person over coffee.
Yes, yeah. But I guess to end this, I just I want to encourage people to really study history. There's so much out there that is not talked about, that isn't taught about, and to just be inquisitive and educate. Just learn, read, and education is everything.
That's it.